The Gospel of John begins with, En arche ein halagas, kai halagas ein proston theion, kai theos ein halagas. In beginning was the Word, and the Word was toward the God, and the Word was God. John proclaims Jesus as the Creator, drawing a direct connection to Genesis 1:1. In the very first verse of the Bible, we observe the symmetry between the numbers 37 and 73. In this video, we will explore the very first verse of John 1:1 and see what patterns we can find. To start with, the total gematria value for John 1:1 has an ordinal value of 657, which is 73 times 9. The ordinal system is the simplest, where each letter of the alphabet is given a number in sequential order. In the Koine Greek alphabet, there were originally 3 extra letters, digamma, popa, and sampi. These letters were part of the early Greek writing system and played roles in both language and numerical values. By the time the New Testament was written, these 3 letters were no longer used in the language for representing sounds. However, they continued to be used for numerical purposes. In the Greek numerical system, each letter had a corresponding value, and these extra letters were crucial for representing certain numbers. The digamma was used for the number 6. The kopa was used for the number 90 for standard and 18 as ordinal. The sampi was used for the number 900 for standard and 27 as ordinal. Even though they were dropped from the phonetic alphabet, their importance in the numerical system ensured their continued use. This is why in ancient texts you may encounter these letters as part of numerical notations, rather than within the language itself. In John 1:1, the verse is composed of 3 distinct phrases. Phrase 1, En arche ein halagas. Phrase 2, Kai halagas ein proston theion. Phrase 3, Kai theos ein halagas. The first pattern we observe is that phrase 1 has 15 letters that make up 5 words. Phrase 2 has 22 letters that make up 7 words. And phrase 3, like phrase 1, has 15 letters that make up 5 words. The first thing that stands out is the approximation of pi in the middle phrase. 22 divided by 7 is 3.14. In Genesis 1:1, we also find the approximation of pi by taking the value of the first letter of each of the 7 words, totaling 22, and dividing it by the 7 words, giving us 3.14. Next, let's examine the number of letters. When we add the 15 letters of phrase 1 to the 22 letters of phrase 2, we get a total of 37. Likewise, adding the 15 letters of phrase 3 to the 22 letters of phrase 2 also gives us 37. This can also be seen above in the letter count forward and the letter count backward. Notice how the number 37 appears at the end of phrase 2 when counting forward and at the beginning of phrase 2 when counting backward. The number 12 stands out as well. Notice the 12th word when counting forward and the 12th word when counting backward. The placement of 12 is significant here since 37 is the 12th prime number. Amazingly, when we add the word count of phrase 1 to the word count of phrase 2, we get a total of 12. Likewise, adding the word count of phrase 3 to the word count of phrase 2 also gives us 12. This highlights the significance of 37 being the 12th prime number. Finally, the most obvious pattern is the 3 usages of lagos in each of the 3 phrases, along with its numerical value. Lagos has a numerical value of 373. This value contains both 37 and 73, reflecting the symmetry found in Genesis 1:1 and in the structure of the 3 phrases in John 1:1. In John 3:14, Jesus said, And just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so it is necessary for the Son of Man to be lifted up. In Greek, the reduced gematria value, where all the zeros are removed, is 333. This value, 333, is 37 times 9. Jesus said in verse 15, in order that everyone believing in him might have everlasting life. This verse in the Greek has exactly 37 letters. Finally, our last verse in John to look at is verse 16. For God so loved the world, so that he gave the only begotten Son, in order that everyone believing into him might not perish, but might have everlasting life. This verse in the Greek has a standard gematria value of 13,690. 13,690 is 37 times 370. Notice the 37-37 pattern as we saw in the middle phrase of John 1:1. Remember what Jesus said in verse 14, "Just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so it is necessary for the Son of Man to be lifted up." With this in mind, let us look at the verse Jesus was referring to in Numbers chapter 21, verse 8. "And the Lord said unto Moses, Make thee a fiery serpent, and set it upon a pole. And it shall come to pass that every one that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live." This verse in the Hebrew text has a standard gematria value of 3,737. 3,737 is 37 times 101. Again, notice the 37-37 pattern as we saw in John chapter 1 verse 1 and John chapter 3 verse 16. 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 24 says, "Who himself carried up our sins in his body upon the tree, in order that, having died to sins, we might live to righteousness, by whose bruise you were healed." The ordinal value for this verse is 1,591, which is 37 times 43. Jesus is the word spoken of in John chapter 1, verse 1. Jesus is the one who spoke of himself in John chapter 3, verses 14 through 16. Jesus is the one whom Moses spoke of in Numbers chapter 21, verse 8. Jesus is the one who carried up our sins in his body. Jesus is the one whom Israel should have recognized when he came.